All right, and so our agenda for today is I will dive in. I'm Matt Cropp, the Executive Director of the VEOC, and I'll do a quick round with the staff, but just a review, I'll dive in with our annual report to the community, where we give a summary of what happened in the world of employee ownership in Vermont over the course of 2021. We'll hear from Justine from the Kalchē Wine Cooperative, which is one of the newest employee-owned businesses in Vermont. A little bit about their experience getting going here. And then we'll kind of move on to the business portion of the annual meeting, which is election and re-election of board members to their seats and election of board officers. And then we'll take a little break that will kind of conclude the annual meeting. And then the board will have an abbreviated board meeting for the second hour. So, folks are certainly welcome to sit in on that, but, probably a bit less interesting than what we'll be covering in the first half. So, before I get into the annual report to the community, just wanted to let Don Jamison introduce himself, and then our newest staffer, Ryan. So, Don.
I'm Don Jamison. I'm the program director is my current title. I've been executive director and co-director and other things since the beginning of the VEOC way back in whenever it was, 2001, I guess it was.
And Ryan is behind me. So we're in one room with one microphone, but Ryan, do you want to?
Yeah. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm Ryan Thornton. I am the new communications and outreach coordinator here at VEOC. I say new, but I've been here since September, and so almost half a year now.
Great. And one of the things that Ryan did this year that was exciting is in the past, our kind of annual report has been a little 2-pager done in Google Docs with a few pictures. He actually took some time into turning it into something that looks more like an annual report. So I will, just because I'm excited we have that, I'll kind of screen share that while and just walking through some of the highlights of the year. And if anyone wants to kind of have a look at it, I'll put a link in the chat as well to where the PDF lives in Google Drive. So just one moment, let me get that screen share going. And there it is. All right. So, this is a picture of one of the newest kind of worker co-ops, or actually sort of a hybrid co-op that came onto the scene, Flatiron, which we'll discuss in a minute. But overall, I'd say kind of 2021 was a really interesting year compared to previous years and all years previous to that. I think the big story is that in 2020, a lot of folks kind of froze up in terms of their ownership succession work. There's a lot of uncertainty around the early kind of phase of the pandemic. By the end of last year, or by the end of 2020, things had started to thaw out, and it felt like things really got going in the beginning of 2021. We definitely saw much more activity than we usually do, both in terms of just kind of interest in ownership succession, but also interest in some startup activity. A number of businesses, groups of employees have approached us, and several have gotten pretty serious, where a business had been shuttered, and then a group of coworkers decided they wanted to restart something kind of along the same lines or in the same industry, which has started to be referred to in the kind of employee ownership, more broad employee ownership world as kind of Phoenix cooperatives. We also kind of from just organizational standpoint have seen a few changes. So at the end of the kind of run up to the conference, Michelle Cooper-Smith, who'd been with us for a couple of years, part-time, decided to retire, although she's kind of still staying a little bit involved, giving us some advice around kind of policy and legislative things, because she's a whiz on that stuff. And then we, in the fall, brought in Ryan Thornton as our communications and outreach coordinator. He's been doing a really great job kind of picking up a lot of the, making sure we have regular newsletter going out and helping put together far more powerful kind of customer relations system. And there's been a number of kind of improvements that have happened since he arrived, and it's been a great addition to the team. And we're working with a number of potential employee-owned companies, and you'll see some statistics in a moment. So in terms of new employee-owned companies in Vermont, there's kind of 2 startups and an co-ops and an ESOP conversion that were sort of direct, full ownership transition or new. Alpine Snow Guards at the beginning of the year in Morrisville converted to an ESOP. Kalchē launched, as you hear a little bit more about later, and also Flatiron Co-op is now up and running, having kind of reopened a coffee shop in a place where a coffee shop had previously closed. And there's also been some increased interest in the idea of the expansion of employee ownership through acquisitions. And so two examples of that happening are, one is Chippers, which is a landscaping company that and Don has had conversations with over many years about possibly going ESOP. They accepted an offer from the Davy Tree Company, which is a very well-regarded national scale ESOP. So they kind of, one of the factors in their decision to be acquired was that it would offer employee ownership opportunities to all of their employees. And then there's an acquisition by Tuttle Printing in Rutland of another kind of graphics company locally, so that they're kind of growing and sort of starting to lean more into some building ownership culture. And we've been having some other conversations on various fronts about, some initiatives around the country. There's someone who's created kind of an ESOP holding company who's been talking about potentially relocating into Vermont personally. So we've had some great conversations with them and some other players. So I think there's some really interesting things cooking on that front. In terms of outreach and education, our annual conference was once again online for its second year. Really, fingers crossed, it's looking like this coming year we will be back in person, or at very least kind of hybrid at the Davis Center, with the ability for people to participate remotely. We're trying to make sure that from kind of an accessibility standpoint, and really being able to just bring more people in who otherwise might not be able to make it at all has been a great, I think, opportunity. But there's also some really, some things to be missed about having, a group of people together, sort of in the networking and everything else that happens. So we're, in the thick of planning for this conference, but we had Ken Baker speak at our last conference, had 165 attendees, 15 sessions, and it felt like a solid success. And we took away some, I think, pretty good lessons. One other thing that we've seen, this is part of, I think, that burst of new energy that we've been seeing kind of more broadly in terms of the ownership succession space, has been a really sort of increased interest and attendance at our webinars. So we do usually a number of just scattershot introductions to employee ownership to many different organizations. And then traditionally before, in the before times, we kind of had a roadshow of ownership succession seminars that were 3 hours long, would cover 4 different common exit paths, including employee ownership. We do it with partners and partnering with the RDCs. We decided, because a 3-hour webinar felt like a bit too much, to narrow the focus slightly to an inside exit. So basically looking at sale to managers, sale to family members, and sale to the broad group of employees. And we've been doing this collaboratively with a presenter from the SBDC, as well as a few sort of other expert presenters like John Davis and Lynn Silva this year. And we had, by far, I'd say the most kind of interest in attendees of one of these in this latest round, which was very exciting to see. We also have been doing outreach to professionals, making sure lawyers, accountants, bankers, lenders, others are really aware of this, and building some partnerships that can allow us to do that long term. In terms of direct assistance to companies, we've first of all just have been having a lot of those one-on-one screening calls where someone reaches out, they want to learn more about, is employee ownership a possibility for my company, what time frame, what model, how would that work? So we have been continuing to do that and have a good pipeline of active cases. We've also have several technical assistance contracts where we provide that first sort of services, the more kind of low touch for free, that's subsidized through the grants that we receive. But if something's going to potentially take a significant amount of staff time, we'll sometimes sign a technical assistance contract that will provide some fee for service work. And we have several of those active right now. Probably the most advanced of those is a company with between 20 and 30 employees that's looking at a worker co-op that we're now kind of moving into, received evaluation, and now going to be moving into more of the transacting mode, where we talk to financial institutions and capital providers, and they come up with an initial offer. And so that's very exciting. And so fingers crossed, we'll be seeing a couple of, at least one, maybe more of those closing in the next quarter or two. And so the from a financial perspective, right? Our we had a year in which our largest source of funding is the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. We also receive sponsorships, and this was one of our best years for sponsorships, despite the conference being online, which was very encouraging, and we really appreciate that support. And then some foundation grants, and then other small things. On the expense side, we were obviously we're kind of an organization that exists to do a lot of outreach and education. We can operate fairly low overhead in many other ways. So personnel costs were the major costs, and then events and other operations. And we were the board has approved, as we have had kind of some sufficient reserves to operate at a deficit this year, which we did kind of at one level, but then also we kind of booked the forgiveness of our PPP loan, so that net meant kind of we ended up formally in the black financially. And then you've met our board of directors and our staff. And then finally, we had Ryan, because this is our first year of operation was 2002, so we're at kind of the 20th anniversary of the organization existing. We hit the point of we had Ryan go back through our grand old spreadsheet that goes back to the very beginning, and just pull some numbers to look at how have things kind of panned out over the course of the year, or the course of the 20 years, and then we're going to do a little bit more digging, and we'll probably release a separate report that gets a little more granular, but a few highlights are in this. First is just this initial contacts per year, where you can see there's a pretty significant trend kind of going up as we've had more capacity to really do outreach, deepen partnerships with a number of kind of key organizations that really we have a great relationship with in terms of referrals and other things like that. And we're on track again to either match or beat this. I think we just hit for the first month of 2022, we've had 6 new contacts. So if you kind of extrapolate out, that keeps up, it's gonna be looking like a pretty busy year. This is just kind of on average by month. When we see, our conference is usually in June, so we always see a big burst in July, and October is employee ownership month, and so there's a little more publicity. So we also tend to see a bigger burst then. So that made sense. And then this is kind of like for new employee-owned companies, charted out by when they were in touch with us. So not when they converted, but kind of when we've had first contact. And so this is there's not a huge amount of information on this one, I think, like for getting patterns specifically, but I'm curious to dig into a little bit more of what our average time and that sort of thing will be. And then about 75% of the companies that did convert or either are still in business as employee-owned companies. There's a few that had sold or gone out of business, as with all private sector businesses, but 75% are still operating, still employee-owned. And finally, we've over the course of that 20 years, we've been in touch with over 500 companies. There's currently 57 by our count, kind of employee-owned companies that are based or have a presence here that we're aware of. And so there's a good significant community of employee ownership, but I think there's a lot of opportunity still, especially in this moment. So I'm excited to see what the coming year and years hold. So I'll stop my screen share here, and then open it up to if folks have questions or comments. And then before I pass it, I introduce Justine to talk a little bit about the Kalchē experience. All right. If something comes to mind, feel free to put it in the chat, and we can, and I'll be happy to address it. But in the meantime, I will pass to Justine to talk a little bit about their experience, starting up a worker cooperative in the midst of, all of the, opportunities and challenges that the current moment offers.
Thanks, Matt. And hello, everyone. I'm really excited to get the floor and to have some time. I'm really also excited to see lots of familiar faces, which I think really just speaks to what a hustler Matt Cropp is. We've been in this just over a year, and the fact that I feel like I've been in contact with a good majority of the people on this call, like we're really getting connected to people who have their finger on the pulse of employee ownership in Vermont. And, you know, it feels really good, and it feels great to be in community with you all right now. So thank you for making the space and the time. As Matt said, my name is Justine Lambright. I use they, them pronouns. I am the Director of External Business for Kalchē Wine Cooperative. My co-founders, Grace, Kathleen, and I had our first concept meeting with Matt on December 18th of 2020, wherein we strategized for about an hour on how to proposition to our then employer how to convert their company into employee ownership. We had originally seen the fundraising campaign for the Oak Street Co-op and realized that there had to be a cooperative way to get our business idea off the ground as well. And so, you know, what started as this conversation, we ended up sort of falling out of talks with said former employer. And at that time we were like, you know, Matt, what do we do? And he was like, you have an idea here, let's make a business plan. And so like for the next month, we sort of met up with him once a week, twice a week, you know, we're sharing emails back and forth. And he really was like very close, giving us homework and, you know, being our editor and our therapist throughout that whole process. And so right now, as I'm speaking to you all today, it has been 409 days. And I am now a co-owner of a worker cooperative winery. We have had a successful vintage under our belt. And we honestly would not have even known where to start if it weren't for the Employee Ownership Center or Matt. So just thank you from the get-go for all of that and for all of your help and support. You know, we decided to start with worker ownership from the get-go because we had gotten pretty frustrated with said shared former employer over like a lack of communication. There was a lack of transparency, a lack of trust. And so we were looking to find a better professional formula, and one specifically that was worker rather than owner centered. And not just because of the idea or concept of ownership, which of course is cool. It's nice to, you know, work for yourself, but mostly just for the day-to-day independence and the dignity that comes along with having ownership in the company that you work for. One of our main tenets of our policies is that, you know, we want to lay the groundwork so that any employee owner can retire with dignity, which as a millennial seems like an extremely impossible task. You know, I really don't know when or how I'll be able to pay off my student loans, you know, have a home. And if everything keeps going the way that it's going, I'll be able to retire when I'm like 85. So it's good, you know, in this situation, we'll be able to form our financials and our goals, you know, with everyone's financial futures in mind, and hopefully be able to change that pattern. Navigating the startup process and working with VEOC played out extremely easily for us. And, you know, I'm not sure if we're the exception or the rule, but we, like Matt, as I was saying, he made himself continuously available. All of the resources that we shared and the connections that we, you know, were put in contact with were always super relevant and enlightening. I know that in a lot of these sort of situations, you get a lot of duds when it comes with, you know, the people that you're going to talk to, or, you know, you get on the call with the person that just wants to talk about what they're doing and not necessarily, you know, find solutions together, or, you know, it just doesn't necessarily make sense. And this person felt beholden to you to give you a next step. So they gave you a next step, but nothing really comes from it. I felt like our time was really respected, and, you know, each thing led to a concrete return for us in terms of, you know, whether it be education or, you know, partnerships, or, you know, just meeting people that are doing the same thing and getting that, you know, like little inspirational jolt. Beyond that, Matt also put me in contact with Round Sky. So I was able to take one of their cooperative leadership certification courses. And not only that, but Vermont Employee Ownership Center had done a trade with Round Sky for like advertisement time. And Matt, you know, very kindly gifted me that class. So, you know, we were able to get that class, get ourselves in really good organizational shape and like lay the groundwork and the foundation of, you know, like structure and processes. And that was completely invaluable. Beyond that, Matt is really good at following up and he's really good at nudging you when you need nudging. So, you know, it was really great, you know, him just following up being like, hey, it's about time for us to have another meeting, wink, wink, like, have you gotten that homework done that I gave you last time? So, you know, and it was in a very loving way, in a very helpful way, you know, never micromanagey or anything like that. But we knew that it was in our best interest, and it really just felt like having a mentor there and someone in our corner to, you know, help us move forward. Matt also connected us with the Cooperative Fund of New England, which is where we ended up starting our funding process. However, another really amazing thing that happened is that, you know, the VEOC began talking with the Cooperative Fund of New England off of our original thread, and come to find out after the fact that VEOC and Cooperative Fund of New England went in half and half with our debt fund, like fundraise. So beyond, you know, all of the actual, like the intangible, like help and, you know, creation and the incubation space, half of the money that we're using this year for our operational funds has come from this organization as well. So there are just so many ways that the VEOC has helped us. And I honestly believe that, you know, we would not have been able to get a full company off the ground in just over a year and a month without y'all's help. So thank you so much. Matt, like I said, Matt's been our advisor and our professor, our mentor, editor, benefactor, cheerleader throughout the whole process, and we could not be more thankful. And, you know, for Kalchē's next step, we are hoping to scale up our production in Vermont with the long-term goal of bringing similar business models to wineries in other regions. So, you know, we'll be able to sort of hopefully like copy paste what we were able to accomplish to other folks that are interested. So yeah, that's what I have to say. I have a quick little video. It's about 3 minutes long. If we have the time, Matt, do you think we can? Okay, cool. Give me 1 second. I did troubleshoot this with my wife before this, so I hope that it works. Sorry. that's a little snippet of what our first year looked like. Again, thank you all so much for your support and for being here and all the work that you put in. And, you know, obviously, thank you so much, Matt. And also just really quickly, I wanted to do a quick shout out to Abby Duke. I'm not sure if she's still in this meeting or not, but she planned and replanned my wedding twice over the course of the the pandemic, and also helped us cancel the wedding both times. So just wanted to thank her very much. But yeah, I think I went over by about a minute, but thank you so much, and here's to another great year.
Thank you so much, Justine. That was a really fun video. That showed the spirit of that crew. So yes, it was a really enjoyed working with them, and you know, in some ways, you know, it's kind of shows sort of the different paths people can get to with employee ownership, where it started kind of as a succession conversation, then became a startup conversation. But you know, it's can be a quite a powerful, wonderful thing. So yeah, and so I think we're going to move on now, unless if anyone does have a question for Justine, maybe stay open for one of those. But otherwise, we'll kind of move into the board elections and that sort of thing. All right. So before we get into the board elections themselves, first, Dawn is going to give a little appreciation of Mary Steiger for all of her work, you know, and as a board member for many years and as an advocate for employee ownership. So Dawn, do you want to come off mute there?
Yeah, well, Mary's been on the board since 2011, and we were really glad to get a worker cooperative onto the board, a representative from a worker co-op onto the board, because it, you know, VEOC had been fairly heavily ESOP-y, but always interested in worker co-ops and always trying to build bridges between those two types of employee ownership. So Mary's been on the board since almost the beginning of PT 360. And Justine, you'll be interested in knowing that this was a kind of a similar story, actually. It was a bunch of unhappy workers who took their, you know, their abilities and started their own company. We got a call back in April of 2010 from George, Mary's partner, who was, you know, trying to figure this stuff out. He'd been referred to us by Jason Cadwell, Matt. It was a CPA who was working at Gallagher Flynn. And we had a first meeting in, let's see, it was it was April, yeah, it was May 24th is the historic day, Mary. Mary and George and 8 physical therapists from this other organization.
I didn't know the exact date, but thank you for
I wrote it down. I was
reminiscing.
I was kind of diligent back then.
Yeah.
And you know, when I first spoke to George, he was kind of dubious about this co-op. It sounded so weird to him. So I didn't actually have a great, you know, local cooperative to refer him to as I do now. So I referred him to Steve McGowan, who was an attorney who did a bunch of ESOPs and was interested in worker co-ops. And he seemed to like convince George enough that it was worth having a meeting. And so when we had that first meeting, we talked about the co-op structure, you know, everybody in the room said, that's what we want to do. So they got it. They really understood it. And the organization actually opened its doors in January of 2011, which, you know, pretty fast, started in April and opened the doors in January. And Mary came on the board shortly after. So Mary, you know, I also wrote down in my notes that you wanted to exit in 5 years. So, well, 2010, 15, yeah. So it's been a few years more than that. I mean, I think it's been a great run. PT through 360 has grown quite a lot. You seem to be going like gangbusters. You've made a successful leadership transition, you know, handing the baton off to Deb. We're so proud of you and so proud of our association with you. And thank you so much for your service on the board for all these years.
Well, I thank you all very much. You know, you're only as successful as the people you have working with you. So we couldn't have done it. I mean, we did have 13 people or 12 people crammed into that little room in Steve's office, Don, with you. And, you know, we never thought that we didn't have the VEOC backing. So we've learned a tremendous amount. I think it's been kind of fun when you've called over the years and said, hey, will you talk to another, you know, potential employee-owned company? I think that there was never a doubt we weren't going to be successful. I still go back to those days when it was a leap of faith for all of us. We had 62-year-old owners and 28-year-old owners. And I just think it was the vision that we wanted, and that we certainly were supported by Don and Cindy and the VEOC. And it's been an extreme pleasure to see the potential for employee ownership in Vermont. I'm so grateful to have been associated with all of you. As I said before, Deb's been, you know, there since the beginning also. So it's a pretty easy transition. And I know that PT 360 will certainly remain in the forefront to help any potential cooperative in Vermont and beyond to, you know, engage in this great business model. So I thank you guys for inviting me today. It's a little melancholy, but at the same time, I'll be keeping an eye on things. I may actually just come to the conference to visit you all. So thank you so much, Don, for all you've said, and Matt and Cindy and the rest of the board for all the support you've given us.
Matt, you're muted.
Sorry. Thank you again, Mary. And yes, we'll definitely have a board member emeritus spot for you at the conference whenever you like.
Okay, thanks a bunch.
All right.
I'll be there at the front desk checking people in with Deb. That was our big job every year.
Iconic.
Make sure that we made everybody feel comfortable.
All right, so moving into the business of the annual meeting here is the reappointment of or appointment and reappointment of board members and the election of board officers. So John, do you want to chair take that away?
Sure. We have a few people who their terms expired. I hate to use that word, but anyhow, and everyone agreed to stay on. And I think at this point, I'd like to sort of make a motion to keep board members. I think what do we have? Elias and Chris, yep, and Linda, who was sort of involved with other things, but graciously decided to stay on with us, and I think it'll work out real well for everybody. So I make a motion to accept for the slate and vote to have those members on the board. Any discussion? Any second?
Second the motion.
Any nays? Seeing none, I think we've got everybody. Welcome back on board. We appreciate your efforts and your time and your input we have in the past, and certainly look forward to more of it in the future. The next thing we need to talk about is election of officers, and I again would like to sort of make a motion to accept the slate as it currently is, unless somebody else wants to step into a position or leave a position. Is there anyone out there that would like to leave the position that they're in, or somebody else would like to pick up a position? I mean, we're open to questions here or suggestions. Anyone have any burning desire? It's awful quiet out there. That being the case, I move to have elect a slate of the officers as they currently stand. And any second on that?
Second.
Thank you, Michael. Anyone opposed to that? So carried, I guess. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for continuing to stay in the positions. I know everybody's busy and it takes some time, and I respect that. And it's for continuity. It's kind of nice to just be able to keep moving along. Everyone's done a great job. So, Matt, anything else?
Great. Well, I think we're 5 minutes ahead of schedule. So I'd throw kind of one last ask out there that if there's any guests who are here who have questions or comments for us before we close the annual meeting, and then we'll do a little 5-minute bio break and come back for the abbreviated board meeting at 4. So just opening the floor. All right. So hearing none, they will adjourn. We'll adjourn until 4 p.m. We'll be in the same room. So you can just turn your video or audio off if you're going off to do something. But and then we'll jump into the board meeting agenda. So great. Thank you to everyone for attending, and we'll be back in a few.